thank you very, very much for inviting me, for coming here, and to have the opportunity to share a little bit. The title of my talk is Fostering Collaboration, right, in Innovation, Technology, and also cutting-edge research. But I'm not here to give you the practical tips or how are you going to be able to build collaboration. I'm here to really talk a little bit about something, and I don't know, are you able to see the slides? Sorry, I tried to use the UTSA colors, and I realized they're a little too dark, so I apologize. So maybe if we dim the lights, you'll be able to see them a little bit more. One of the things that I've done, I had the opportunity of doing, the privilege of doing it as a program officer, was really to unite a strategic as well as systemic efforts to change, and in particular to change HSIs. Oh, sorry, before I do, I was looking at my slide. I guess it's not in the right thing. I apologize. But before I start, I really want to acknowledge the individuals that gave a voice to my experience, to my lived experience in particular as a Hispanic women in science, but also as a faculty in HSI. And I also want to acknowledge those who have given me the motivation to really change things at scale, who ignite my desire to take action in significant ways, and to not be apologetic about it. That was one of the things that I learned. Many times we're apologetic for trying to make change where it's needed. And most important, they challenged me to change the system for HSIs. And a few of those great scholars are Sarita Brown, Gina Garcia, Nancy Lopez, Anne-Marie Nunez, Deborah Santiago, Carolyn Turner, Patricia Hurtado. The name goes on. And in fact, even the PIs of the hub have inspired me. I remember when I first started, some of the conversations were, because again, NSF had provided funding, but it was very limited. And it was very limited to do the scale that needed to be done to really address all the HSIs. And those conversations planted the seed of the fact that we needed hubs and centers that now became the HSI NICT. But it was to continue conversation, discussion, and also a fight, because many times to change things, there's resilience, and there's sometimes a little bit of some challenges, actually some great challenges, right? But we were able to do that. And as well as with Sarita Brown, when I started, I remember she pulled me to the side and she said, you come from this community, right? What are you guys doing? The program that you have is not comprehensive, right? So at that point, I thought, okay, we need to look into further what other programs are doing that are serving minority institutions, and what do we need as an HSI? So that led to the whole revamping of the HSI program, right? But most important, it led to us becoming conscious about who we were and what we needed to know about to be successful within the HSI community, and to know what they really need. I know many of you who I've worked with, you came to me when I was a program officer, we were listening. And I hope that you realize we were listening to the reflection of what has come. I know that there's a lot more that needs to be done, right? But sometimes baby steps are actually giant steps, especially when you don't have access. As I was saying, so I had the opportunity at NSF I started with that slide, to be able to do systemic change at scale, but to work with the entire community. And what really allowed that is really being able to know and understand who we are, right? Who we are in a very reflexive way, to be able to do continuous reflection about my positionality, the space I occupy, and the opportunity I have to make change, but also who influenced me and how I influence others. And that's something that I really want to come back to HSI. If we want to do innovation and collaborations in a very impactful way, to really occupy a space in STEM that we should, HSIs really need to start to be more reflective on who they are, right, and their position, and who they influence, and how they influence different individuals, but also how they're being influenced. That's something that I really want to drive point. And also, like I said, my lived experience as a scientist, right, growing up, being able to, sometimes I realized that I had to leave my identity, like in SACNAS we would say, at the door, to walk in and to have a seat at the table. And that should not be the case, rather than being able to be who we are. So why do HSIs exist, right? Well, the short answer is really to intentionally and systemically create equity, reduce educational attainment gap, and advance student success. That is the short answer. And in particular, because many institutions, government agencies, as they try to create equity, they're looking only at equality, right? They don't realize the intrinsic intersectional characteristics of the individuals they're serving or at the institutions that they're serving to really think about, we have to create universal designs that work for those institutions, right? And that sometimes best practices that have been applied don't really apply anymore for HSIs because we're so unique. But that's really one of the things that we have to look at in terms of that. And let me, in a very short time, because I would like to ignite more of the conversation, and I had so much to say that I realized I put too many slides, so I apologize for that. I remember being a speaker and looking at speaker rush through their slides and say they didn't prepare. I swear to you, I prepared so much because I had so much to say. I told my husband that I had so much to say because if you have had a chance to meet with me at any time, HSIs and helping my community is at the heart of who I am and what I do. And I didn't want it to shortchange you. But I apologize because, like I said, I ended up saying too much. But I want to talk about the history, intersectionality, positionality, reflexivity that HSIs are not doing. And the ones that are doing it are being very successful, as well as the unique characteristics and the strengths, right, that make us, and the topology, the institutional diversity, from the missions to the resources they have and the expenditures per student and the lack of it as well. And the challenges and opportunity and how we're always evolving. And all that, because in order to understand that, then we will be able to know exactly what we need to do to be able to bring innovation. Did I change it? There we go. So the history, right? In the 1980s, a group of activists and leaders in the community created the construct of HSIs. However, it was then through a lot of efforts, Haku was able to be a lead in pursuing Congress to actually formally recognize HSIs, and more important, to assign federal appropriations to these institutions through their funding. And they were recognized in 1992. And then programs such as the one in the Department of Education, the USDA, and the NSF were created. That's 1992, right? Well, change in some places is slow, right? Very slow, because it was until 2017 that the HSI program came to be. And that is why I'm pointing that is because many times we tend to be very positive, right? Very optimistic, which is great. And we don't realize the internal working that is happening and that we have to also be part of to be able to make that change. However, when it started in 2018, the funding and budget was 15 million, right? Within a year, it went to 40 million, and then 45. And my understanding is, and then 46.5 million. When I left, it was 46.5 million. Now it's 48.5 million. So why is that? It's not that the government has so much money that they just want to throw it at HSIs. No, it's they understand that to build capacity at HSIs requires a significant effort because of their diversity. Because some of them have very well-established programs for undergraduate education, yet they don't have the infrastructure. Some other ones actually don't even have programs yet. They're starting to get created and don't have the capacity to build them, right? And that's just talking about programs and degrees that have to be created. There's additional things in terms of research, expenditures, what is being dedicated to faculty to be able to grow, to educational development, to all those things, right? So, and I just wanted to give you a sense of that. Now, the designation of HSI, and I haven't highlighted there because everyone talks about at least 25% Hispanic. They forget a very important factor, low income. And why is that so important? Because if we, as HSI faculty, HSI administrators, or organizational leaders, and even representatives in the federal agencies, do not recognize the fact that the students that we're dealing with, that we're trying to promote and advance, come from already a world where access has been denied, access to many things, basic things, right? And that therefore we need to actually guide them better. We will be condemning them to a life of poverty, right? one of the things that we really need to understand is we need to build structures that work specifically for those individuals that have been marginalized, right? And that, unfortunately, the designation of an HSI does not give a roadmap. In many institutions, in particular, those that are more research intensive, right, focus on the numbers, the 25%. They forget that there is no roadmap, that in fact, we have to look at what certain scholars had done to be able to gain that roadmap. And one of the things that that is very, very important also is to understand that by the designation and the way it was created and the way it evolved, it's intersectional. It's intersectional. You're talking about Hispanics, which are already very diverse, intersect with low income. By design, all the approaches that we have to take have to be intersectional. It has to be at the heart of that, right? And we all know that different social characteristics do not exist in isolation. Social characteristics such as age, nationality, social income, social class, they all work together, and they work together to influence our experience because they work together and also are impacted by the actual systems of power that we occupy. And I'm going to try to move a little quickly. Sorry, I'm a little bit technological challenged there. But what is intersectionality, right? Many people think, oh, it's the list of all your characteristics. No, yes, it is. But what has to be very important that what it does, it gives us a tool to understand who we are is impacted by the space that we occupy because of the actual domains of power, right? That's very, very important. And Patricia Collins have given us different tools. But one important thing, intersectionality without action, which a great scholar who is present here, Nancy Lopez said, is really an empty promise, right? It's just it's not what we're supposed to be focusing on. For student success, especially when it comes to HSIs, Anne-Marie Nunez developed a multidimensional model, right, that included both the intersectional characteristics and experience, like the A in the diagram A, but also included the domains of power, the different domains that influence those experiences and they really bring to concrete understanding of those experiences, but also the historical context. Many people forget the historical context, right? HSIs in the Southwest have a history that is very different than the HSI history in, let's say, in Florida, for example, right? And that history, that historical context, comes into play with also political context. What is the political context and the climate? And not the climate that we're facing just right now, but that has been present for years in certain regions, right? And that's very important because that would impact the experience that our students are going to have, our faculty, and also the power of the institution to change or not change the experience. And I just pretty much defined that. But one of the things that is very important to understand is that our intersectional experience and characteristics are fluid and dynamic. They change in respect to the space that we occupy, even within the same time frame, right? For example, as a scientist at SACNAS, my experience is very different than when I have walked to, let's say, certain advisory boards, whether it's at the AAAS, whether it's in other organizations, that individuals like myself have not been present or have been present but not as prevalent as they should be, right? An experience that is very different. And the treatment that I get is very different, and therefore also what I could impact. So it's important to understand that. And it's also important to understand that even if we don't, we want to deny that the systems of oppression and the systems that exist of resistance are not there, we're in that space. We're in that space. So we have to do something. Just by being there, we're in that space. Many people, when they talk about intersectional identities, they talk about marginalized individuals. Well, everyone has intersectional identities, right? Including the prominent groups, the ones that have privilege, I mean, I have a lot of privilege in the space that I occupy. And I'm going to go very, very quickly. Like I said, I apologize. I made a lot of slides. But I also want to talk about the topology very quickly. And I guess it was the previous slide. Well, the topology of HSIs is massive. It's defined not just by the size, it's defined by different characteristics. And the one that I wanted to show was the one that it was actually, hold on, there we go. The topology model that was developed by Anne-Marie Nunez, right? And it was just a framework to let us start thinking about the diversities across institutions, right? And what are the different items that could exist. It was mentioned, we have 2-year institutions, 4-year institutions. We have predominantly undergraduate institutions, research-intensive institutions that are already performing at the R1 level, even though sometimes they don't have the structures. We also have those that are emerging to be research institutions, which are known as R2s, comprehensive institutions, private institutions. We have everything. But within that context, we also have a diversity of resources, which is key to what we could do and what we cannot do. A diversity of environmental factors that influence, and also diversity of who are constituents. Who do we serve, right? Even institutions, who do we serve? Because like I said, I like to use Florida and California as 2 different examples, right? But maybe now I should start using Texas, right? Because of the political climate as well, as 2 different examples of who do we serve and what historical context and geographical context, political context are we occupying, right? But there's a lot of different diversity within that. Now, if we look at the characteristics, wow, that even is even more mind-blowing. I wanted to include all the characteristics, and I realized I'm not going to have enough space, right? And then I tried to just highlight some of the very important ones, right? The size, also whether there's urban, whether they're rural, and also the percentages, right? Currently we have about, and this is from Excelencia 2021-22, but at that point, 68% of them were public, and you had 60% of them, about 59% were 4-year institutions, right? But privates also play a very significant role, and 2-year institutions absolutely play a great role in terms of preparing our students to go into 4-year institutions and also just to go into the workforce themselves, right? And one of the facts that I was very shocked by, and I use that a lot, so, and I know that I think it was Maria Elena who mentioned it, or about the number of students that we serve, which is 66% of them, right, that are fully enrolled that are Latinx. Well, HSI is not only comprised of 70% of the minority-serving institutions, but they actually serve more, they enroll more Black students than historically Black colleges and universities, and more Native American students than tribal colleges and universities. So that tells you the social obligation that we have. And not only that, but what is more important, the potential to really advance science. We continue to import scientists and import talent, right? When the talent is right here, it's right in front of us. We just have to flourish it. We just have to make sure that it blossoms, right? And that's very, very important. As you know, the roadmap that we were able to obtain through great scholars and activists, right, that had bold and what would some people call radical ideas, gave us a roadmap, right? A roadmap to be able to start to understand what we need to do to be able to serve the students. Servingness, which is a multidimensional and intersectional concept that you're very familiar with by Gina Garcia, Anne-Marie Nunez, and Vanessa Sansone. And then reframing race as street race, which was coined by Nancy Lopez and her colleagues. And what is street race? Is what you think that other people in America will define your race based on how you look on the streets. And why is that very important? Currently in the data systems that we have at the national systems, we ask one question about race, and and we can really don't separate race, ethnicity, ancestry, many things. We think that race is interchangeable. And the way that we ask it, we don't allow individuals to really be able to put the information of who they are. And why is that so important? Well, guess how resources are allocation are determined. What is the metrics of equities? It comes from the national data information that we get. Who occupies what space, right? And if we don't understand that street race, we might be assigning resources not appropriately or ignoring individuals that need more resources, especially within the Hispanic community, right? We have light-complected Hispanics and dark-complected Hispanics, and their experience are vastly different. I know that my sisters have green eyes and blue eyes. We walk into the store, why do I get followed all over the place? Why am I asked, do I have money to pay? That has happened, right? I said, of course, I'm the one treating them. Right? But I look brown, of course. So, and that is honestly a true reality of resources allocation. And street race starts to really untangle that and gives us an opportunity to be able to really consider what are important. And this is very important because currently there's efforts that are trying to reduce the amount of information that we get in the census, right? You know what that's going to happen? That's going to erase many of our people in our community, right? So how can we contribute to innovation and collaboration if that happens, right? Now, another thing is that we have to make sure that when we are dealing with HSIs, we take an appropriate lens. For example, in Excelencia, they take the lens of Latinx, and they're not apologetic about that. They use now an approach of confianza, which is really a sign of familiarismo, family, respect, and obligation, and to really stretch the close ties. And then they use the frame of their seal of excelencia, which is built with 3 components, right? Data collection and analysis, as well as leadership involvement, and as well as targeted initiatives that they really are, and then they build from their strategic plan. And they work with organizations to build it at scale. So those are 3 examples of, they have given us a roadmap. Many institutions hold the seal of excelencia, and it gives bragging rights. But most important, it allows institutions to really do a self-assessment. I know I'm running out of time, but let me. So it's very important that institutions really take a continuous reflection of who they are and the position that they occupy, right? It's very, very important for advancing innovation, entrepreneurship, and cutting-edge research. Why is that so important? Because institutions right now are focusing on how do we get the funding, the federal funding, or how do we get as fast as possible to start to be more innovative in science. And they forget about who they are, who are the faculty that make up their institutions, who are the students that they're serving. And they forget about serving is for sure. So that's very, very important. They have to take continuous reflection. And they also have to look at their positionality. And even the institutions that are very small, that lack resources, need to do that because they are a significant player, right? And they need to see their positionality to be able to build collaborations, to be able to really connect with others, right? We cannot, I remember when I was at NSF, right, at some point there was an idea going around that we should cut R1s. And I'm always for the underdog to say, yes, let's cut down R1s. And then suddenly someone said, Tatiana, what do you think about the work that is being done in engineering, in particular that requires big infrastructure, big equipment, right, that only exists at our R1s. You cannot cut them. We need them. We need them and we need to build partnership. I mean, when I say we, I'm saying smaller institutions, community college needs them. But also, R1s need the community college and the smaller institutions. And we need to understand that, right? In this ecosystem of HSI, not one institution is better than the other. In fact, there's a lot of things that we lack. R1s many times lack the understanding of servingness and the understanding of reaching out to their students and how to really engage them in a way that brings a space that is welcoming to them, where they could really blossom, right? And then you have smaller institutions that understand that very well and very intrinsically in the things they do, is right embedded in what they do, yet they lack the resources. They lack the partnerships. They lack the connections. So we cannot go forward with just one aspect of that, especially as HSIs, right? People say, well, the next you know, UCLA is about to step in and become an HSI, right? And they're definitely one of the giants, right? Just like Florida International, Arizona State University. I mean, there's a few giants in the game, but they honestly don't have certain things to really promote their students, right? And their faculty as well. Their faculty that comes from the HSI environment, I should say, right? And that's something that is unfortunate, but it's something that we need to really think about, right? And also as smaller institutions, we need to think about our positionality. So when an R1 institution comes and asks you to partner them with them in a grant, you know that you have power, that you are able to ask, of course, but this is what we need, and this is going to be the rules of the game, right? That's very important. And the R1s also have a lot to gain and also to earn from in terms of finance and things like that. I was going to talk about servingness, but you all understand it very well. That's when we actually not just have the criteria of the designation, but we also have the productivity of producing, having students be successful and produce that kind of majors and training that is recognized by the fields in STEM, as well as having a culture, that is welcoming and enhances their success. And then, and of course, I was going to talk about the big risk about actually taking things from a race-neutral lens and with one-dimensional approach. That does not work for HSIs. I remember when I was at NSF, I would really dislike when people would use best practices. And I would say, for who? For who? Because even for HSIs, there is no best practices. We're so different. So you first of all have to, and I would tell you, you have to break it down to me. I said, community college, what is the resources they have? What is their student body population? Are they urban? Are they rural? And then you could talk to me about best practices. Otherwise, no. So I try to refrain from using best practices because then we're being boxed in to have certain kind of behaviors, certain kind of processes and practices that don't work for us, right? And then I was going to go deeper into the understanding of street race, but I know Nancy Lopez is here, and like I said, and one of the most important that I want to stress in street race and redefining race, we have to come together as a community and ask that race be redefined, because resources are getting allocated based on what the data is showing in the census, in the national data system, even within the agencies, We need to redefine it so that we are able to really account for those individuals that are being completely erased from data and from our systems and that are not getting resources. So we really need to think about redefining in a way that really speaks to our experience. And definitely, I was going to give an example in education, but we'll leave that for another talk. What I really want to say is that we as HSIs have to embrace the concept and approach that Excelencia use, in particular with confianza. We are a family, right? We need to become a family, and we really need to have that trust and that responsibility, hold mutual respect, but also mutual responsibility for each other's success, right? We must do it, and we must also hold ourselves to higher standards. We must collect data, reflect on that data, and then provide and develop strategic plans with that in mind, as well as practice, and bring our leadership involved. We really have to have leadership at the table, of leadership within our institutions, leadership within NSF, to be able to do that. Now, I'm no longer at NSF, so I could say that, right? One of the things that gets federal agencies very scared is when they get a call from a congressman or a senator saying you need this, right? So what am I saying? I'm saying we need to walk ourselves up to Capitol Hill as a group and start to think about what are the things that we need and start to advocate for the things that we need so that congressmen and senators start to speak for us, right? Because otherwise they won't listen to us. And lastly, I want to make sure that I do say that, reflection without action, like I said before, is an empty promise, right? We really need to be able to take the theory of servingness, street race, excelencia, seal of excelencia, confianza, all that theory, right? And reflect on our positionality as well as our institution positionality and the institutions that we're working with, and then take action, right? We really need to take action. Intersectionality is really a call for action. It's not something that we just read and say, okay, we understand who we are, but it's really about taking that action. And there's multiple layers, right? When we look at systems and powers of dynamics, there is, and how the individual influences the system, but most important, how the system influences the individual. And for that, we really calls for critical reflection and ongoing reflection throughout. I like that picture because I think that's who we are at HHIs. We're in a cliff, right? And we need to jump to the other side. And none of us are seeing. We're in a cliff, honestly, and I mean that. With artificial intelligence, with technology rising so high, we're in a cliff. And we are expected to get to the other side, right? And most of us are jumping and going down the cliff. Because what we're doing, we're taking things about, okay, how are we going to collaborate without really understanding who we are and who are we supposed to be collaborating with and how, right? And that's why I apologize if you were expecting some practical tips about collaborating. I could definitely talk about that. But if you don't have the infrastructure or the resources and the supports, you could spend your whole life trying to collaborate and trying to build partnership with industry, with the communities, and not get very far, right? We first of all have to understand who we are. And because I know I'm out of time, and I really want to open the floor for discussion in various aspects, right? And aspects that really talk about what we have done, not just as an entire ecosystem of HSIs, and also, but what have our funders done, right? And they're listening, right? But like I said, we don't have time for another 20 years for us to jump into the artificial intelligence world, which they're asking us to do, right? They're asking us to do no matter whether we do it or not, right? People ask me, you do mathematics. What do you think about AI? So, well, I'm trying to even figure out what that means. I mean, in the sense that we're all trying to do that. And this is a picture that I got in terms of if we're going to do transformation of an institution or an ecosystem, it requires multiple steps, right? From inquiry, framing, understanding our position, design and the universal design, and then also active dialogue, especially with those who don't have access, who are not present at the table, and critical reflexivity, and then going all around, all over again, ongoing, right? And I could share with you that slide. It's built from different sources that I created, right? But, I really think that losing self-reflexivity and institutional reflexivity, just like Patricia Collins said, is really being a sellout, right? And one thing that I know you're not, just like I was not when I was accused when I first walked into NSF, someone said, you're a sellout. And I said, no, I am not, and you're about to watch what I'm about to do, right? And we did it. And we're not sellouts, so but that means reflexivity and really accepting what we're doing wrong, right? Accepting that things that we hold up to a higher regard, that we admire, might not be doing what they were supposed to be doing, right? And we need to hold them accountable. And definitely, really understanding intersectionality, and because otherwise, if Nancy Lopez said, intersectionality is a stand-in for analytical laziness. We actually have to take action. And with that, I want to thank you and thank Marianela Zavala, Elba Serrano. Honestly, what some people said, what you did at NSF. No, what we did at NSF what we did. And what we did because we work as a community. Because, and not only because, like I said, with the exercise, it was not just conversation, right? I remember being on the phone with Elva Serrano, and she said, I have data. And says, can you send it to me, right? Data about the needs and what we needed to do. And of course, we're just tapping on it. And I know NSF is here, and to really work at scale, we need more. We need more resources, we need more support, but we gotta help NSF. That's why we gotta go in and advocate for them to get more funding. But we also gotta help NSF understand who we are and what we need, because things change, change very drastically. And like I said, I know you were thinking, what are the practical things to do for innovation? The most practical thing is to understand who we are and to start to connect. In fact, on Monday, the HSIs who are research intensive are having a summit, right? And I'll be there, and one of the things I've been saying is, we first of all have to understand our deficiencies. And we are ones, right? There's a lot of deficiencies, in particular, servingness and understanding what that means, right? And really helping faculty grow as scholars in their teaching, but also in their research, right? And we have a long way to go. And hopefully, it will be a fruitful discussion. Hopefully, people will not be looking at things that we're already doing, but there's opportunities, right? How big are depends on what we do and how we come together. But with that, like I said, I want to be able to open it up for discussion. And I have all the references if you need them. I know. I did my homework, and like I said, I'm happy to share with you. And I remember I started with, Elva's gonna hate this. I started with like 72 slices, Elva. So I did good. I did good, and then I couldn't cut it even further.